Welcome to Two Millennials and Mom, where we bring you engaging conversations and respectful disagreement across the social spectrum.
Injected with the quirks of everyday life.
Grow up as we navigate the complexities of this modern world with all the humor and warmth we can muster.
And the occasional gentle ribbing. We're glad you're here. Happy listening. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our next episode of Two Millennials and Mom. And I guess this week it's really Two Millennials, a Zennial and Mom. We've got our first ever special guest. This is my brother, Trey.
How's it going?
We're glad you're here.
Thank you.
So we've talked about Trey in previous episodes, so now you guys get to meet him.
Yep.
Yeah, today we're talking about kind of some generational differences and kind of how we feel like we were raised. And we thought it would be pertinent to have Trey in on this episode as well to kind of join us and compare our experiences. Ladies, how are y'all doing today?
Good. I had an excellent breakfast this morning that I didn't have to cook, so I'm pretty happy.
Hard to beat.
Yep.
I'm wiggly. Probably because I sat still waiting for breakfast to cook.
Trey, how about you?
Forever.
Ready to go.
Nice. All right, so we're talking a little bit about generations and kind of how like we feel that we were brought up a little bit differently than some of the people around us. Callie, what do you feel like made our upbringing different?
So I think like for me, and I've thought about this several times over the last decade and a half, I feel like one of the things that we were brought up to do is to address problems, not just to sweep them under the rug, you know, especially in high school and things like that. Like I remember having friends or friends adjacent who would get in trouble and you're like, oh, I would be in so much trouble. I would never be allowed to see daylight ever again. I would be grounded for life. And then they're back doing the same thing the next weekend. And it was just like, wait, what? And so I think that we were brought up much more accountable, being held much more accountable. And I think that has very much impacted the way that we see life even today.
Yeah, I think it took me a long time to learn those lessons, but I definitely feel like that was a big theme growing up was to own your shit, take responsibility. If you screw up, say, hey, I screwed up, and somebody will help you fix it. And that's way better than it not getting fixed and you trying to bullshit your way through it.
Well, and I think that the moment that you do end up bullshitting your way through it, because a lot of people do, that's a very common coping mechanism. You start to realize, at least I do. I would tell you that sounds so arrogant. I would tell you that I'm a pretty emotionally intelligent person. I know how to be each of these emotions. I know what they mean. I know that they're only temporary. And I can see in people around me and in my kind of peripheral that a lot of people don't know how to moderate themselves and their emotions and they think that they have all of these great coping mechanisms. And you're like, no, that's just anger. You don't actually know how to be anything but angry. And that becomes problematic really fast.
Yeah.
And it's really detrimental to people around you.
Would you say that you were brought up pretty similar to the people around you or different?
I would say I was brought up pretty similar to the people around me.
Okay.
Yeah, we were definitely a confront what you have to confront type.
Right. Just for a little bit of clarification here, Trey is our half brother, technically speaking. So we kind of grew up in a mixed household. We weren't always growing up in the same household. He would kind of move back and forth between his mom and our dad. And so that was kind of why that question I felt was pertinent.
Because I think blended families make a difference because you are going back and forth between households that manage differently.
Straddling that fence.
Yeah, and that I guess parenting style, if you would, could be drastically different between the two households.
Yeah, I always felt like Trey, had two different things that he had to meet up to. And as a little kid, because, Trey came into my life when he was 3, so he was tiny when we first, became a family together. And I always say, we got married, and then I guess about 6 months later, his mom remarried, and then about 6 months later, we had Callie, and about 6 months later, Trey's other brother was born. And so those were big transitions for a little kid to make
really
with
fast.
a family. Yeah. Do you remember
Interesting.
that, Trey? Does it, I mean, do you think that had an impact?
I don't remember really any of that.
Oh, wow.
I would say that parenting styles on both sides were different. I don't think they were drastically different, but they were definitely different. But as far as me remembering, I was 2 and 3 years old when all this was happening. I don't remember much of it anymore.
I was just sitting here wondering, in general, across the board, when do each of you remember kind of like, when do your memories start?
I was just thinking the same thing. I was going to maybe suggest that for a weird thought later. What's like your very first memory? I want to say like the very furthest I could remember back, there are two things that really, really strike me. One was, I think it was my second birthday. I had a Timon and Pumbaa cake on the front porch of the old house. It was white with blue trim, and it had Timon and Pumbaa little figurines on top of it. And then the only other thing that I remember kind of from that same time frame, I remember being at Lisa's house in their guest bedroom and having taken a nap and wet the bed at someone else's house in the afternoon. I was mortified.
Just to note, Lisa was your caregiver.
Yeah, my babysitter when I was 3.
Probably. Yeah.
So I'm kind of laughing and kudos to you, Mom, because my first memory is also that same birthday party, Cole. Your Lion King birthday, like vividly. And I couldn't tell you anything before then. So even when I was asking the question, that was my memory. That's where it starts
funny.
for me.
That's funny. And by the way, I don't believe I did that cake. I think your grandmother did that cake.
I mean, it was obviously a memorable party, though.
Yeah.
I mean, it was on the front porch, and I
remember
think
it being
the memory was
really
him
good
licking
and the icing being phenomenal.
Yep.
Yeah, because your grandmother had worked for a bakery, so they did cakes all of the time. So she did all of our cakes back then.
So Mom and Trey, when's your first memory?
I remember bits and pieces, but I couldn't tell you what was the first. I remember stuff like sitting out in the cold at the balloon festivals in Plano.
Yes.
I would have said I was, as hard as I think, I do not think I can remember a 3-year-old or 4-year-old me. I remember
you got 10 years on me, so mine might be gone by then.
Yeah, but I remember coming home from a birthday party at my mom's way back when. Couldn't tell you how old I was, but I had a balloon, a helium balloon, and it blew away as I was walking up the stairs. I remember that. I was really mad at that.
I bet.
And I would say then I might have been 4 or 5 at that point. But I don't remember that party, your Timon and Pumbaa party. I do not remember that one.
Funny.
So that's really funny because I think mine is a birthday party too, and I was 5. And what I remember about that is Dad wanting to take pictures, and you were supposed to have the sun behind you to take pictures. So, and we were little, so Pam and I are short, and he's 6 foot tall, and he's trying to get us to look into the camera, and all you're doing is looking straight into the sun. And so he's getting mad at us because we're not looking at the camera so he can take the stupid picture. So I remember
were you having flashbacks on Friday?
Maybe that's what those looks are for, Callie. Flashback looks.
Yeah. But I think that's so interesting just because all of ours have to do with like pretty significant emotions. So even like Trey's was joy that turned into frustration with the balloon. Cole and I, with his birthday, like it was exuberance and joy. And then yours was a birthday, which I would say is the same thing. I think that that's fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Way interesting.
So in general, would you guys say that you were more impacted, influenced by nature, where you were, the surroundings, the setting in which you were in, or nurture? What actually happened to you, how you were treated, whether it was by your parents or outside influences? Which do you think is most strong for you?
I would say for me, it was, I don't know that one was necessarily more impactful than the other. I would say that they were both really impactful on my development because, I mean, especially growing up and going through the public school system and having so many different influences from the other kids to the different teachers that I had. I had some really, really fantastic teachers, and I had some really, really terrible ones. And so I think some of those are an example of nurture, those teachers that were were excellent and really made an effort to not just teach you, but to help you understand things and to not give you fish, but teach you to fish, if you will, that really kind of helped critical thinking and helped reasoning skills and really kind of pinpointed, hey, this is what's happening right now. These are the repercussions. These are the consequences of these actions. Here are the different ways that it could play out. And it's kind of up to you to determine how that's going to end up instead of just saying, well, this is what it is. It is with any level of finality. And so I would say that it was a little bit of both. We talked about this a little bit earlier this week, Gig, growing up where we grew up out at the old house, having so much room, not really having neighbors. I mean, we had each other, and there were a few years there where Zane lived behind us. So I had a friend that was close, but I mean, I would have said that Zane was gone by the time I was 6 or 7.
But still, our neighbors were family. They were all, even if they were more distant family, not immediate nuclear family, like it was family. And I would tell you, don't get mad at me, but I would tell you that we grew up with a lot of old people. Sorry. They were all for sure adults. Outside of Zane, like it was adults.
I think I'm going to say nature plays a great deal. And we've talked about this before. We grew up as Texans. And I think that has definitely been an impact on us of just almost like a personality trait. So I think that's part of it. I would say I probably grew up with older people too, Callie, which is an interesting parallel to get. But I am also going to say I grew up super close to my grandparents, and they were farmers. And that part of my life definitely impacted me. I mean, there are times that I'm sad that you guys didn't have that exposure to just that agricultural, because I just think it was a real basic kind of life. And it's different from the technology that you guys grew up with by far. And so to me, there's just a difference there. There's a substance there growing up on the farm. And really my grandparents, because both of my parents were, they were known as the juvenile delinquents. That's what my grandparents called them. They were, in a lot of ways, they were selfish. They did what they wanted to do. And my grandparents were handy to hand the kids off to say, hey, we're going to go do X, Y, Z. And if it took them 3 days to do that, and my grandparents would come and stay at the house, and we went to school, and I was just as close to my grandparents, maybe even closer than I was to my parents. And my grandparents outlived my parents. So, there was a point in time that I would have told you I was more like my grandmother's child than her granddaughter. And so, and I grew up, and we talked about this, she grew up during the war. So rationing and saving was second nature to her. So I see that in my own life today. It's hard for me to, throw things out that are still useful. And you guys are much more of a get rid of it generation. You don't need it, so get rid of it.
Yeah. Now, and I think we talked about this last week, I still have boxes from things that I don't even own the object anymore, but I still have the box that came in. I don't know why.
That's funny to me.
I truly believe that is such a millennial thing. It is routine that I will see somebody online talking about, why do I still have my iPhone box? I haven't had the phone in 15 years, but I have my iPhone box from 2008. Like, this is ridiculous. And we keep them all. We're hoarders in that capacity. I mean, in case we're going to return it, which never happens. So silly. So silly.
No, I was just laughing because there are boxes in our closet that we cleaned out the other day that are computer boxes in case we return those computers. Big boxes.
No one wants anymore.
Nobody will use.
You would have to pay someone to come and take it off of your hands at this point, but it's going to be boxed beautifully.
Yeah. It'll package well.
We're ridiculous.
Yeah.
But okay, so I wanted to kind of chat through some of the impactful things that have happened in each of our different generations and kind of discuss how they have impacted us directly. So if you go into baby boomers, you had things like the Cold War, the post-war boom, the swinging 60s, the Apollo missions and the moon landing. We watched a movie about that the other day with my mom, and she's sitting here going, I remember this. I remember watching this on TV. And part of me was just completely baffled that was live, that was real. You know, I'm not saying the moon landing didn't happen and that it was staged. I don't believe that, although 1 in 10 Americans does.
Allegedly.
Whatever. Allegedly. The youth culture shock, Woodstock, how family oriented they were, and the nuclear family, and the rise of the teenager. Those are some of the kind of monumental things to come out of the baby boomer generation that they were growing up with. And then you've got Gen X, which, as we talked about, Trey's kind of on the tail end of that, but is the end of the Cold War, the fall of the Berlin Wall, the Reagan-Gorbachev whole debacle, Thatcherism, Live Aid, the concert, the introduction of the first PC, which, Mom, you probably still have the box for, early mobile technology, latchkey kids, and then rising levels of divorce. Trey, how much of that do you remember?
Divorce? None of it.
That's interesting.
I mean,
no, I wouldn't say I remember a lot of that, but then again, that all happened
He was little.
right when or right before I was born.
Yeah.
So I more had the aftershocks of that versus the actual.
Right.
Yeah, that's almost like asking me what were the 80s like.
Yeah.
I mean, which is why I'm asking, because I think it's so fascinating how monumental it is in the big picture and how tiny it kind of is in your zoomed in view.
But I may be completely wrong about this. So, Trey, you have to tell me. But I think you probably lived a little bit different than the two sets of siblings who were always at that parent's home. And you were going back and forth between that. So I feel like that probably had an impact on you.
Gotcha. I mean,
the
in
difference
the 80s,
of having divorced parents and not having divorced parents.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, I guess so, because it was two completely different upbringings. When I say parenting styles were similar, they were in some aspects, but at the same time, I have on my mom's side where there was a neighborhood and kids to play with everywhere, and there was always the newest, greatest gaming console in the house that we played. Well, when I came over to Dad's house, we were out in the middle of nowhere. We were outside playing. We weren't sitting in front of a TV. We had a Nintendo, the original Nintendo that we would come out every now and then, but we didn't play video games or anything like that. It was more of a...
We were walking around the woods with BB guns shooting stuff.
Exactly. So, I enjoyed both of them.
Yeah.
I almost wish that, and I can't say that I didn't do the hunting and the fishing on my mom's side, because I did, but I had way more of that on this side of the family. And when I look back, those are some of the times that I see the most and that I remember the most, was that kind of thing. For sure.
I love that. Your dad will like that.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Okay, so scooting forward to millennials, Generation Y, the kind of pivotal moments were September 11th, the terrorist attacks, the invention and launch of the PlayStation, which is probably why we didn't have all of those things, because they weren't around yet. Social media, the rise of social media, the invasion of Iraq, reality TV was a big deal, Google Earth. I mean, there were lots of technology infusions and growth in especially like my upbringing. I remember when Facebook, you had to be in college and you had to be invited by somebody with your college email.
Yeah.
It was really cool. I was in high school and it was really cool because a girlfriend of mine had a brother who had invited her, and we had our email addresses that we like snuck in there. And so we had Facebook when we were high school kids, and that was a big deal.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing that I think about every once in a while. There were definitely some major technological advances that occurred. I mean, not only for baby boomers, but especially for Gen X. I mean, talking about it, that's when they landed on the moon the first time. I mean, there were some massive leaps in technology from the 60s to the 80s, but the rate at which it accelerated from there was exponential. And so
Oh, yeah.
while there were some big individual steps during that time frame, all of those big individual steps led to 30 different smaller steps that occurred in the next generation. I mean, you're talking about the computational power that was used for the early space missions eventually evolved into this thing, which is more powerful than any of the computers that they had. I mean, it's got more processing power than any of them.
I think our first computer had 256 megs on it, and it was a big computer, a home computer at the time. Now that wouldn't even run 90% of the apps.
Can all of you still remember the sounds from dial-up internet?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have a couple of like Instagram pages and things like that I follow. One of them is called Millennial Misery, and it's just all of these weird things that nobody else would care about or understand. And we're like, yes, that is my childhood. That's what defined my childhood. And so it just makes me laugh. I think you can also see that, Cole, you were talking about the evolution of technology. I think that you can see the way that has shaped our individual generational communication efforts and what our preferences are. You know, going back into like mom's parents, our grandparents, their method of communication was written letters. I mean, think about it. You've got men overseas in wars, and you can't go and pick up the phone and call somebody. I mean, I'm not saying that the phone wasn't invented, but it wasn't as readily available. Sorry.
Well, you had long distance charges.
Absolutely.
When I got married, your dad nearly had a coronary the first time that our phone bill came in, because I called my mom, who was living in Houston at the time, and he had never had a phone bill like over $20. It was a $200 phone bill. Y'all have never had long distance charges. Y'all call internationally without any issue. I had to pay for all of that.
We had roaming charges on cell phones.
For a little
while.
Yeah, for a little while, but still. And so then after the maturists, that previous generation to baby boomers' preferred method of communication is face-to-face, ideally, or telephone or email if required, like if that's the best that you can do. And then the Gen X is email or text message, and that's what their preference is. It also makes me think, you guys, I'm not trying to speak ill of the dead, but we're going to get to it here in a minute, and I'm just going to apologize to the universe and to all of my grandparents in the process. Do you remember grandmother sending, what are they, chain mails? Emails?
Lord. We had to block her.
Gosh. Yes, you had to, because she got the internet and she wanted to share everything with you. And so all of a sudden you have 65 emails, which was a huge deal back then. All of which,
if you don't forward this in 10 minutes, bad news is bad luck is going to hit you.
Your whole world is
her
ruined.
With TikTok?
Oh my God. That's our weird thought for today. Grandparents with TikTok. Oh my God. I love it. Okay, so scooting forward to after Gen X with Gen Y for millennials, our method kind of would be social media or texting. There is a huge, fun, like silly thing about how millennials don't pick up the phone and call anybody. Like, just text me. Don't call me. Just text me. And so you might be sitting there sending a text message, and somebody responds with a phone call and they just won't answer. And you're just like, I know you're standing right there. I'm right there with you.
It blows my mind that y'all can argue over text messaging. Y'all can have big fights over text messaging. Yeah.
I hate it because you can't inflect tone nearly as well.
No.
I guess I'm weird for a millennial. I call my friends all the time, and they're like, just text me, and I just call them back. So yeah, I've had to train all of my friends to answer their phones because they know that I won't respond to them via text message. If I'm trying to have just a point A to point B conversation, I'm going to call you, have the conversation, and be done with it. I'm not going to take an hour and a half to try and wait for you via text message. If you can't talk for 5 minutes, call me when you can.
I kind of straddle the two different mediums. Like, I think there is absolutely a time and a place for a text message. I think that it makes me think out my thoughts more and spend more time using my words effectively and efficiently. But there are certain people, like, I don't want to text you, Mom. I would much rather call. And we're going to sit there and gab and go around on all of these things. But then if there's an opportunity for me to get information that I need online and I don't have to talk to another human being, I'm all for it. But those are people that I don't know, and I don't want that kind of relationship with. So if I'm texting you a lot, it's probably because I don't like you as much as I do everyone else. Truth hurts.
Okay, here's my weird thought. And I will haunt all three of you if you do this. Do not announce that I've died on Facebook. I will come back and kick your butts.
Yeah.
That is the weirdest thing in the world to me, that you post on Facebook that somebody has died. No, don't do that.
I will say, I think that we as a society need to get better at shutting those accounts down posthumously, because I was doing something the other day, and this is probably going to get me in trouble too. And this is just my episode, I guess. But I was doing something the other day. It was when I started my Threads account, and all of a sudden it came on and it was like, hey, your Aunt Charla, who's been dead for 3 years, she's following you on Threads. And I was like, okay, it's so strange. And I get weird notifications from her account still. And it is just kind of creepy.
I had a friend pass away, and her husband would use her account. So you would get current stuff from her. I had to block that one too.
But I know that I do have a friend or two that has passed away that, like, their Facebook account is still active with their birthday in it. So their birthday pops up and says, hey, and that, I kind of like that, because it keeps that, you say it keeps it alive.
The memory.
Yeah. I was going to say something similar. I had a really close friend of mine pass away a few years ago, and his Facebook is still active, and I still tag him or send him messages on Facebook sometimes. And his mom and dad use it kind of as like a memorial space for him, which they're not posting through his account. They're posting to his account from their own accounts. And that's like, I actually kind of like it. It's a nice outlet for grief sometimes. And so I'm a little
now
bit
you're making me feel bad.
Well, I'm just saying I totally get what you're saying, and to an extent I agree with you. I don't know that. Here's the thing. Is it that corporation's responsibility, or is it the family's responsibility? And do they now have to set rules for their deceased loved one's Facebook page and go through and set all of these new settings for a page that isn't going to get used anymore, except by a select few?
How many people would even be able to access their loved one's page, though?
Okay, so that's part of it, though. Facebook Meta has done a really good, decent job of saying, hey, you need to set up a legacy contact. Let them know that this is who it is so that it's all ready to go. Apple's also done a really good job with that. So if for whatever reason something happens to you, this is the person that I'm leaving all of this information in access of, and then you can memorialize it. So kind of like you guys were saying, it's still there and people can post to it, but it doesn't come up and say, hey, Callie's birthday is today, go wish her a happy birthday. But it changes it. So you can still use it for the grieving side of it and the community part of it without it requiring a trigger warning.
And they wouldn't be following you on your new social media account.
Right. It's still there as a memorialization, but it's not there as an active page that is being creepy.
But that's relatively new, isn't it? The legacy part?
Yeah, probably the last 5 or so years.
Oh, that's more than I thought.
Yeah.
I would have said 2 or 3.
Yeah, no, it's a little bit more than that.
So back to your generation explanation, what Trey has told us, because he said he didn't identify as either. In fact, his birth year, depending on what list you're looking at, can be either Gen X or Millennial, and that he didn't really identify solidly with either one of those. So we got to looking at it, and what did you call it, Callie? Different from what Exennial. And Trey's like in the lost generation.
Yes. So when me and my wife actually had an argument about this, I wouldn't even say an argument, but
A debate.
A heated discussion.
about if I was a millennial or a Gen X. And I have always classified myself as a Gen X, but she wasn't having that. So I started doing a bunch of research on what classifies a Gen X versus a millennial as far as years go. And a lot of them say 81 is a millennial. But then you'll find 25% of the studies out there that say 81 is a Gen X. And I found one article that was really good. I was actually trying to look it up earlier today to remember exactly what it was saying. But it basically said that between 81 to 83, I believe, was like a lost generation of people that are in this gray area that don't really have a spot in this timeline. So it was kind of weird. I have noticed that when I am with groups of people, I generally side with Gen X more than millennials in my train of thinking.
Yeah.
But
I would think so. Like in my head, I would probably identify you more as a Gen Xer than as a millennial. That's kind of an interesting point, though. I'd be interested to see like if those kind of gray zones exist in all of the different changes to generations, like between baby boomers and Gen X, or between maturists and baby boomers, or even between millennials and Gen Z. Because like I'm sure that there are some kids who were born in 95, 96 who identify more with me than they do with this new Gen Z era.
But I think a big part of it is between Gen X and millennial is a huge transition.
Yeah.
And I don't think that it's quite as big of a, like when me and my wife were talking about it, I don't think it's quite as big of a fight whether you're a baby boomer or a Gen X or a millennial versus a Gen Z than it is for a Gen X versus a millennial, because a Gen X sees a millennial is
so drastically different.
But a lot of times you'll see the Gen X that hates the millennial time frame.
Right.
You know, it's like this huge gap that I don't think that separation in mindset happens in the other generational changes.
I can see that.
You know, I used to have a boss who would always talk about, he was a Gen X, like firmly Gen X, and he would talk about other employees, and he would be like, well, that's just the millennial in them. They don't want to work very hard, and they don't want to do anything. And and I sat there, Mom and I had several conversations about it. I was like, and so I would start sentences like, okay, like I know that I'm supposed to be a millennial, but I don't feel that way for all of these specific reasons and topics. And she finally was like, Callie, you have got to loosen up on your definition of what it means to be a millennial so that you can still keep living. Like you're okay. You don't have to fit every single box of what a millennial is in order for you to have been born when you were. Like that's okay. And so I think that there are some generational gray areas everywhere. I mean, I don't want to sit here and text all day long. I don't want to get on every single social media platform. But then I saw something on one of these lists where it was talking about instant messaging, and I was like, oh my God, I missed that so much. And then I started thinking, I was like, isn't that just texting? But you don't have your away messages where you can put your favorite song lyric of what you're feeling right now, and thinking about back to MySpace pages and things like that. Like we're in 3rd or 10th grade, 8th grade, sitting there becoming little miniature coders because that's what you had to do to customize and make this play and all of this. I mean, it was just so fascinating to me.
Tom, you're still number one, bud.
See? Everybody in our generation knew Tom, and you automatically had a built-in friend. Like, I feel like that changed it. See, she doesn't even know.
No, it took me a minute to remember who Tom was.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Oh, yeah. It was a big deal. And so I just think it's so fascinating.
That's kind of that huge generational thing when we talk about like Gen X versus millennials is MySpace and all of that stuff. Cell phones. And now cell phones were around in the 80s when I was growing up, but they weren't
nearly as predominant as they are now.
Yeah. An 18-year-old, a 20-year-old did not have a cell phone in their pocket.
Yeah.
All through my high school years. I mean, it was beepers and pagers and everything. MySpace didn't come out till after that. We were on Yahoo Messenger.
AOL.
Yeah.
Heck all through high school.
Yeah.
So all of my schooling years were more in that Generation X time frame.
Right.
I didn't have the cell phones and the social media and all that stuff. And then about the time that I graduated high school, actually probably a few years after I graduated high school is when all that really hit.
Yeah. So you had already had your childhood and most of your development before that would have been in effect to make you a millennial.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
I totally get that.
Trey, how many of your early jobs included a computer?
Well, the job I have now
And
does.
Callie, yours all did, I think, except maybe when you were waitressing.
I mean, you still had a POS system where you had to put it all in. You weren't
That's
writing
true.
it down and put it in the kitchen.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say I worked with too many jobs. I've never worked a computer job in that aspect where I sit down at a desk and I am at a computer. I have always been in the trades. I've, framed houses and, well, I guess when I worked for Benny Keith for a while, there's computer aspects, but you're really not. You're a salesman. You're out in the
function of your job was not sitting at a computer. It was out interacting with people and saying, "Hey, how much more do you need to buy?"
So probably not until I was really got into the electrical industry when I became a lineman. A lot of that stuff computers were integrated with, and I worked with dispatchers that were doing everything on the computer for me out in the field, but that wasn't till 10 years ago. So
yeah,
it's crazy.
And I remember my first job working a computer was a compact, that great big huge compact thing. And Cole, you talked about coding. You almost did have to code just to be able, I mean, you didn't have Word and Outlook. You were doing basic word processing on this stuff. You had files, but they were all, documents. There wasn't anything fancy about any of that. And
yeah, it was just code referencing more code.
Yeah, that would have been about the time I got married. So
there wasn't
certainly
graphical user interface that had really been implemented at that point.
No, I would never have dreamed of playing games on the computer at work. I just wouldn't, that wasn't even anything that we thought about.
But here, let me throw you for a real loop. I was talking to some Gen Zers the other day, 2000, 2001, 1999, that was when they were born, and they didn't know what pressing 0 on your phone was. Like when you have a call directory,
the operator?
They didn't even know what an operator was.
Well,
what is that? Why would you do that? How did you know to do that?
That's so funny because I hadn't even thought about it not being there, but yeah.
I mean, a rotary phone, like those were toys for us. That was so crazy.
Well,
I mean,
my friend had one in his kitchen. I used it a couple of times to call mom and dad, but it was more of a novelty than everything.
That's what there was no cordless phones when I was through me even being so close to y'all. We didn't have cordless phones until I couldn't even tell you when.
I remember
I was in high school.
First set of wireless like house phones we had at the old house, and how much that changed the dynamic. Instead of having to go to the corded one and sit at the corded phone to be able to carry the phone around with you. If you were going out to change laundry or if you were working around the house, you could just stick that cordless home phone in your pocket, but you had to remember to put it back on the...
It had a clip.
It had a little clip, and you had to remember to put it back on the docking station, or it would... Because, I mean, its battery wouldn't last for a day or two.
Yeah.
Oh, Lord.
It always get lost in the couch. And I remember when I turned 16, my big gift was that I got a phone for my room and my own phone line. And that was a huge deal. For the record, it was a cordless phone, and that was a huge deal in and of itself. But the ringtone was Blink 182. Just to put that into a perspective.
Like the second generation of Nokia cell phones, Callie, the ones that had the interchangeable faceplates.
Heck yeah, I did.
When did you get that?
Best when we went to Arkansas with church. I was probably a sophomore in high school.
So it would have been
junior
right around
in
that
high
same
school.
time.
So to show my age, the phone that I remember the most, and I don't know if y'all have ever even seen them, but Mecca probably has or remembers. It was a corded phone, but it was the clear one that you could see all of the innards to.
Yeah.
I had a Game Boy like that once.
That was my That was the coolest thing. I thought that was the cat's meow. was that phone. And it was a corded phone. It was just a little bitty, but it was completely clear plastic, and you could see all of the little circuitry and wires and everything inside of it.
That's funny.
That's hysterical.
That is so funny. Okay, so scooting back in away from technology, but I just think technology is such an interesting aspect of this. So I'm certainly glad that we got off on that little tangent for a bit. But going back into how we were raised, I want to talk about gender roles. I'm in this particular children's discussion, I'm the only girl. And then you two were boys who sandwiched me on each end, being younger and older. And then Trey, at your mom's house, you had two other younger siblings. They were also a boy and a girl, but they were flip-flopped. I'm just really curious as to if you guys think that gender roles kind of played a role in our upbringing. Were we treated differently? How did that work?
I don't remember seeing anybody being treated differently.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think that there were some things, like it would have been, Dad would have asked Trey or I to take out the trash or to do yard work a lot sooner than he would have asked Callie to do it, but he wouldn't have not asked Callie to help with something in the yard. Like stuff like cooking and doing laundry. Like I don't think it was ever more Callie's responsibility than ours. It was just those kind of basic chores didn't seem to have like these really inherent gender roles like they would have in a previous generation. I think that there were some differences in how we were approached, and I don't know that all of that has to do with being a boy or a girl. I think some of it might have. Callie being the only girl, and I don't want this to sound bad, but I think she got treated differently than I did in certain aspects. That's what I'm struggling to articulate. I don't want to say that
we could just come out with it. I was the favorite. It's fine.
But see, like I don't ever remember looking at it like this as a kid. And maybe it was as much a difference in our personalities as it was a difference in our genders. I think you were much more comfortable asking for things and doing what it took to get what you wanted. And I just kind of wanted those things and didn't necessarily want to do the things that it required to get them.
Such a millennial.
And okay, let me clarify here. I worked really hard not to be that parent who said, "Oh, my daughter can't play, or my son can't play with Barbies, or my daughter can't play with, guns." I didn't want that. I wanted y'all to be who you wanted to be. So I want you to know that I'm happy to hear that I think I was somewhat successful at that. But at the same time, there is difference between a female and a male in how they communicate, and even y'all's personality. I mean, Callie was that kid who wanted you to be watching her all of the time. Cole, you were the you were the opposite. Cole, you were on your own. You were very independent. You could play by yourself for hours. Callie could never have done that. I mean,
and that's why I think it was more a difference in personality than being a boy versus a girl.
Yeah.
One of the things that I'm most proud of is you telling the story that I did not know about until recently, is you talking about how you and Dad took comfort in knowing that if the house caught on fire and something happened, that I would get the boys out.
I can't believe you didn't know that.
I had no idea.
But Cal, you were the most responsible.
By far.
The boys could, I mean, squirrel.
How many
everything was a squirrel to the boys, but you were. So we always felt like if y'all were there by yourself and something went wrong, we knew that you would be calm enough, focused enough that you'd get the boys out. Yeah. They would have a great time in the process.
Oh, yeah.
But you would get them out. And they wouldn't be thinking about you and if you were safe or not. They'd just be having a party while, hey, look at the flames. That would be cool for them. And you would get them out of the house because you would know that they had to get out of the house.
How much older am I than you, Callie?
You got 7 years on her, and she's got 5 on me. 4.5.
I'm playing in the fire inside the house.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think that
But there was a
you're
time,
right, though.
Trey.
I don't doubt that one bit.
Yeah.
But I think that there's so much to be said about that, just because in general, I am very adamant about efficiency and wanting to make progress and move things along, even today in my life today. Whereas you guys are so much more open to relaxing a little bit and having a good time and enjoying the ride, where I have something else I have to do. I got to go and keep going and make more progress. And I think that kind of ebbs and flows in being a good thing versus being a bad thing on both sides. I mean, when we have, I think that's a trait that I got from my dad. There's very little that really riles me up in the middle of a traumatic situation. I'll deal with that later. Right now, this is what we got to do. I'm not going to freak out. I'm not going to panic. I don't got time for that. We have stuff to do. We need to do right now. Whereas I think, Cole, you especially, you absorb all of that, and it can be overwhelming in that moment. And then later, you're very good at processing it and saying, oh, this is what we could have done better. This is how it should have worked. But that overwhelm kind of tends to take place at a different spot on a timeline, if you will, for you versus for me. But
I think that comes to you a lot more naturally than it does to me. I think that's something that I've had to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I did not know this about myself until Mom mentioned that story about we knew you'd get the boys out. And I was like, oh, that's really weird. And like I said, when I brought this up, now it's something that I'm really proud of because I don't think that I learned that. I don't think that I think I inherently knew that. And I think that is a trait that I very directly inherited from Dad. That's what he is. That's who he is. There's no ruffling his feathers in that moment. And afterward, he might be super really upset. But until then,
probably not.
We have work to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably not.
Yeah. He's the calm in the storm for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about all of us getting in trouble.
I never got in trouble. What are you talking about?
Not one time?
Not once.
Let me say this. I'll precede this by saying there were different methods. Like you could spank Callie, and that made a difference to her. I think you could have beat Trey to death, and it wouldn't have changed anything whatsoever. Cole was the
one. Have to cut that part out. This is 2024, and abuse is bad, Mom.
I said you could have. I didn't say I did.
I'm still alive.
Still alive. But Cole was the one that, if you talked to him, if he thought you were disappointed in him, that was the worst thing that you could do to him. So y'all were all so different and not in the getting trouble, because y'all all kind of did the same kind of stuff to get in trouble, but our methods had to change with each of you as to how to address when you were in trouble.
The different kind of corrections were pretty significantly different across the three of us. The actions you had to take to correct that behavior.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
I will say, I remember Dad always, every single time I got spanked, he would say, this hurts me more than it hurts you.
And
you're thinking, yeah, right.
Yeah. At the time I was. Yeah. And now looking back, I'm like, I get it now. Sorry, man.
It did. It was hard on your dad to spank you.
I think I only remember getting spanked once.
Oh, gosh. I got spanked a lot.
I only remember one or two times, but I know it happened a lot more than that.
Oh, yeah.
I don't remember which one it was, and maybe you'll have to cut this out too, but I remember finally being mad enough that we were somewhere, and every step I took, I was swatting you. So every step was a swat. Every step was a swat. But I don't remember which one of you it was. It was probably Callie.
Probably.
That sounds about right.
I also very vividly, I still kind of flinch when I think about it. You would reach up and grab us by the ear and drag us wherever you wanted us to go. And that hurt.
That's because my friend Becky, who had sons that were bigger than her, said, if you want to make those boys behave, go for the ear. And it worked.
It worked.
Oh.
Maybe that's why I've got
still
such
think
that one.
good
I
head
don't, maybe
movement.
that's why my ears are so big.
I was going to say my ears dangle. Exactly. So I had a couple of things listed here on goofy things that we kind of got in trouble because you mentioned a minute ago about us getting in trouble in the same and various ways. I don't feel like I did a lot of bad things, like especially in high school. I didn't go to parties. I didn't smoke. I didn't do drugs. I didn't drink. I didn't do any of that. But I was late to school damn near every single day, and I ended up in school suspension because I was late all the time.
Yeah.
And so
No one else is going to give yourselves up here.
What was
Come
the?
on.
I'm not a late person.
I mean, I'm late to everything, but fashionably late.
Teachers don't take too kindly to fashion in that sense.
Oh well. What was the repercussion for that, Callie? Did mom and dad do anything about that? Was there?
I don't remember mom and dad doing anything about it, but I definitely ended up for like 2 weeks in school suspension, which if you really want to know the truth, I thought was fantastic because I could just run through my work really fast and then I got to read a book.
Yeah.
And so I just sat there in silence reading a book and just completely entertained. It probably did not have the impact that they expected for it to, and it didn't stop me from being late. I just got better about planning my schedule so that I could go to teachers who didn't care.
I think that we were pretty good about letting you take the punishment, not trying to. And we had this conversation earlier. We very rarely jump to your defense first, which I think is something that goes on now that I think is really wrong when, parents immediately blame the adult for whatever was going on, because sometimes it really is your bratty kid that's doing it. And so we didn't immediately, we were ready to hear, now what was the story? And only one time do I really remember being mad about that. And Callie had gotten in trouble for something that she didn't do at school. And they hadn't questioned anybody. Just, they took a teacher's word over hers and they were wrong. And I knew they were wrong. And they hadn't questioned anybody. And then when I went in to make them question somebody, they were like, well,
we hadn't thought about that.
She didn't do that, but they didn't apologize. And that made me just as angry because they didn't apologize to you. And I thought they owed you one. But with that one, I was positive that you had not done it.
Yeah. A teacher had accused me of calling her a bitch. And my mom said shit, and that was a bad word. And I didn't, I was a people pleaser. You don't say bad things, and you're certainly brown nosing to teachers. Yeah.
So Cole got in trouble for that in what, first grade?
It would have been first or second. I said bullshit on the playground. And one of my...
And I got in trouble.
Well, yeah. Late. But... So I don't even remember what was going on, but one of my friends did something, and I said, that's bullshit. And it was one of those, ooh, I'm going to tell on you kind of situations. And I just remember looking at him and saying, what? Bullshit's not a bad word. My mom says that all the time.
And so is that the one where they sent the note home?
Yeah. So he went and told the recess monitor, because I think we were on lunch recess, and he went and told the recess monitor, and that recess monitor told our teacher, and I got a conduct card to take home at the end of the week with a note saying that I had not gotten a happy face, that I had gotten a frowny face that week because I had said bullshit on the playground. And in second grade, I'm 6 or 7. I still have terrible handwriting to this day, by the way, but at the time, I didn't know how to spell mom's name. And so I had tried to spell it once and didn't think I'd gotten it right. So I just kind of nonchalantly asked Callie while she was working at the computer how to spell mom's name. And she told me, so I crossed out the first one and tried again.
So this was on a note that came home to the parents, so the parents could acknowledge that he'd gotten in trouble.
Yeah, to sign that I had to bring back and take to my teacher. So on Monday, I took that note back to my teacher and
with mom's signature on it.
Yeah, mom's crossed out misspelled signature. And
from a
first grade writing, yeah.
Yeah.
So then I get a phone call. I sent a note home to you, and I don't believe that you received it. But I'm also going to say that your dad had that framed, and it sat on behind his desk for years and years and years.
It's
There was
still
a
in the
great
safe.
story. There's a great story that he still laughs at you writing his mom's name wrong, trying not to get in trouble.
So funny. So
yeah,
funny.
bad words have to be on me.
Okay, so my next question is this. Do you, and I feel like between Trey and Cole, you guys will have the best kind of outlook and perspective on this. Do you feel like mom and dad's parenting kind of tactics, approach changed over the years?
I don't see that it changed that much.
Yeah, I don't know that you would have seen that change.
Was I already out of the house by then?
Yeah, I think you were pretty much kind of already out of the house by the time it had really developed and had started to change. And I would tell you that from the time I was in middle school until the last 10 years, it's evolved pretty steadily throughout that time frame, which makes sense with kids who are growing up and getting older. But yeah, I would say in general, you kind of relaxed eventually. At some point, it was just they're going to figure it out or they're not. And it doesn't matter how much I hold over their head or what the consequences at home are. Eventually, they're going to have to figure out that your actions have consequences and you've got to deal with those consequences. And I think that we may have picked up on it a little bit better than some people I know. And so it kind of gave y'all the opportunity to relax a little bit. And instead of being this kind of, what's the word that I'm looking for? Because I don't want to say like overbearing. That's not what I'm looking at. Instead of becoming the disciplinarians, you two kind of changed. And it's not that you wouldn't instill discipline. It's that it became more important for you to become a faucet of wisdom for us to bounce ideas off of and to guide us more than punish us.
I think that comes, though, with a kid as the kid grows. I mean, when a kid is little, you can say, no, don't touch that. Or you can, spank their hand or swat their butts. And for a little while, that works because you're just setting the guidelines. But after that, there's more to it. You have to fine-tune that more as you're growing up.
You have to teach them why there are guidelines.
Yeah, more nuance.
And that becomes more important than teaching them what the guidelines are.
I think we had a relatively consistent idea. I always wanted y'all to be polite. I mean, you were going to be in deep trouble if you went to somebody's house and acted up. That was just it. All three of you were like that. You didn't talk back to adults. You better be respectful. So, and
we ate everything because you had to.
Well, you don't eat everything, but you certainly didn't sit down at a table and say, I don't need any of this.
Yeah.
Not if you wanted to live past first course.
I mean, you could be a picky eater at our house if you wanted to, but you were going to be skinny.
Yep.
Yeah.
You didn't have to eat it, but they weren't going to make you anything else.
Yeah. I'd agree with that. There was never I'm not going to eat that. You at least had to try it.
Yeah.
There would be one bite of it put on your plate for you to try it. And you had to try it. You couldn't just say no.
Yeah. Yeah. That was the rule. You had to take one bite to try it because miraculously, every time y'all would take a bite, you would go, I like this. This is good.
It's not as bad as I anticipated.
Yeah.
I don't know what makes kids think it's going to be bad when they've never tried it before.
My daughter drives me nuts over this.
I think part of it was...
Remember, you are the parent.
I know.
Was us not having an opportunity to learn that from other people.
Do what?
I think a part of that is us not having the opportunity to learn that from other people. Like we already kind of had this figured out by the time we were going to school is you eat what's on your plate or you don't eat. You have to try everything. And not before I was going to school, I wasn't going over to other people's houses very often. I didn't have friends that I was going out and hanging out at their houses.
You didn't know there was another option.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We didn't know that was a choice that we could make. It was, I'm hungry, I better eat this.
Is it bad that y'all didn't have a neighborhood?
No.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Again, I think that led to, and you can look at it in Gen Z versus even millennials really clearly. I think that led to opportunities for us to create our own fun and create our own entertainment. And because we didn't have all of the gaming systems and because we didn't have other people to rely on, we had to rely on each other. I mean, I don't know how many trees I climbed as a kid. I mean, I feel like
A lot.
Has Kayla ever climbed a tree, Trey?
No, I don't believe so.
I mean, we had to. Like, that's how you entertained yourself, and playing frisbee and eating dog food. I mean, like, that's just what you did because you could.
Yeah.
Last year, I did have to teach her how to climb a fence properly so she could climb over the fence.
Nice.
I'm
without
so
hurting
proud.
yourself.
Proud of you.
Callie, you talking about the dog food brings up one of my funny stories. When you were little, I'm going to say you were probably 2 years old. You started, and it didn't last very long, but you got to
Because
where
I would eat anything.
if you could find food in the dog bowl, you would eat it. And I had spent a day, and you were little. I had spent a day trying to keep you out of the dog food. It was kibble. So thank God it wasn't soft stuff, but it was kibble. And Daddy came over.
Your dad.
And my dad. And we're sitting there talking. And I turn around and your cheeks are full. You have this, and it's dripping out of your, and I was so mad by that time because it was like the third or fourth time that day. And I said, spit it out right now. And you went, and then I just kept talking to Dad, and I thought he was going to freak out. He was like, are you not going to wash her mouth or do anything? And I go, no, it's the fourth time today. She'll get over it. And that was the end of, and I don't remember you ever going back to eat kibble after that.
I can't wait to put this on the internet.
But he was livid with me that day.
Oh, that's funny. But okay, that makes me laugh. So then my next question, go ahead.
I think I was leading into your next section because I just saw it in the notes and I'm really interested. What do you think the most impactful social event during your childhood was? Like for me, I would have said probably 9/11. Like that's the one that I remember the most clearly.
Which you were in what, second grade?
I would have been in third. In fact, I remember.
See, I was in college at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was going to
Right.
NCTC
So
then.
what was the most influential for you? Where were you when the world stopped turning?
I mean, that was really, as far as I could remember, as far as social events go, that was definitely the biggest that had even happened in my lifetime. So I would have said that would have been it. I remember I was at NCTC right here, right up the road, and I believe I was walking down a staircase and there was a TV on. And when it was all going down and happening, and we sat there and watched it. But yeah, what year was that? I was probably 20 years old, 1920.
Would have been 20.
Yeah.
So
I'm
is
trying to
that
think of,
the one for all three of you? 9/11 across the generation?
I'm trying to remember if there was anything before that even...
That probably would have overshadowed anything. I'm trying to think of like what would have gone on in your lifetime that would have had even close to that kind of impact.
I remember the
But I'm
Oklahoma
not a
City
news
bombing.
person.
Yeah.
Oklahoma City bombing, I do remember that, but it wasn't near at the magnitude of 9/11.
No. But it was a big deal where everybody was like,
and it was
and
close
I feel
to
like
home,
that
too.
was-
I
yeah.
say close to home. It was
to
way
home.
closer to home than
It was
New
also
York,
an American that did it.
Yeah.
And there were so many children involved.
Yeah, with that daycare
Right.
being right there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think of, because like mine, like being in third grade, I didn't hear about it until later that night. I remember specifically hearing about it. We were at our house celebrating Nathan's birthday because his birthday is September the 12th. And he and I were running through the living room. And I remember you and Dad and Bart and Laura just being in the living room, just crying, just tears in your eyes. And Nathan and I kind of stopped and were like, what's going on? And y'all having to explain it to us, kind of what had happened at that point. And just like that particular moment, like not having seen a room full of adults with that kind of reaction to anything in my life, just kind of how strange that was as a kid. But I'm trying to think of like what could have happened through the mid 80s to mid 90s that would have had such a broad social impact on an American kid. Like, were there any
Trail.
like Oregon Trail?
Yeah, Oregon Trail.
Nice.
But yeah, I don't really remember, but I don't, and to this day, I am not a news person.
Right.
So unless it was a huge worldwide event like 9/11 or like the Oklahoma City bombing, it wouldn't have been on my radar. And especially in my 20s, I'm not a big news person. In my teens and before,
how fast can I make this car go?
But you know what? That's technology again, because it wasn't at your fingertips, and now it is at their fingertips.
Yep.
Do you remember the Challenger exploding?
Absolutely.
What year did that happen? I remember seeing
86.
I remember
he would have been
something
5.
about that in school, but I want to say that it was after the fact in school. It wasn't that moment.
Yeah. What about the Hubble
telescope? I want to say maybe news clips. I want to say I can probably remember news clips of it happening, probably when it happened, because it was a giant. But that was pre me knowing what was going on. It didn't mean anything to me because I couldn't comprehend what had happened, or the meaning of what had happened anyway. I don't really remember the Hubble. I mean, I remember hearing about the Hubble telescope, but it wasn't on my radar of, oh, that's neat or cool or big, you know.
Yeah, I was just looking to see if there was anything kind of monumental. What about the Bill Clinton, Monica Lewinsky scandal?
I remember it, but it didn't have any impact on anything that I was, especially back then. I have slowly started to become more of keeping up with politics. I'm one of those people that I get really agitated when I think about politics. So I kind of push that to the side a lot more than I probably should. But at that time, it wasn't anything that it didn't bother me or sway me or influence me one way or another. It didn't.
Okay.
Water under the bridge. It didn't impact me at all.
Okay, I have one more. You would have been in your later high school years. What do you remember about Columbine?
I remember watching Columbine on the news.
Yeah.
I remember watching Columbine on the news.
I said I wasn't a big news person in all these events I remember seeing on the news. That would have been 99. So, I mean, I would have been 17-ish. I was too busy going out and playing with friends, honestly, at that time.
But I think that's a real significant point, Kelly. You guys did not grow up with school shootings. You did not grow up having to prep for those, or, when I was a kid, we had air raid things or tornado drills and that kind of stuff. But y'all didn't have to do any of that. And
did y'all not do tornado drills?
We did tornado drills. We had lockdown drills, but I mean,
but not school shooting.
No.
Well, that's what a lockdown drill is.
I didn't. Y'all might have. I did.
That's what a lockdown drill is. It's there's someone in the school who doesn't belong there with intent to do harm to people who are there.
And you did those calls?
But I would have been in first grade when Columbine happened. So that would have been my second year of school. So I still had 10 years of school after that, where those were that would have been something that we probably did once a month.
That's so interesting that I didn't know that.
I do remember them evolving over time. So at first it was the teachers would just lock the doors, turn off the lights, and everyone would get on the wall that is next to the door. So that, because all of the windows, all of the doors in our school had windows out into the hallway. And then it kind of evolved where they started using different methods where they got these little stickers that they would cover. They were just the right shape to cover the window, and they were red on one side and green on the other. Red meant that something wasn't okay. Green means that everything in the classroom is okay right now.
So I remember those really starting in like middle school. I would have to do the math as to how old I was at that point, like what years those were. But I remember things like that, but I don't ever remember them being very frequent, certainly not to the extent that they are today. And B, it was never It was never based on everything going on in our school. It was, hey, there's a prowler in the area, and so we're going to lock the school down. And eventually it did come into, and this is what you do inside of your classroom. But for the most part, it was, hey, go to your classroom and stay there because the whole school is locked down. It wasn't so much like, hey, shit's going down inside of the school.
And I think that's another thing. Your schools did get locked down. I mean, people weren't, my school was open. Anybody could walk in the door at my school, do anything.
I was the same way.
It wasn't a big deal, but y'all, it was much more regimented.
You had to have an ID card or a badge to get into pretty much any of the schools. Like, I remember, and I didn't put the 2 and 2 together at the time, but when I first started going to Sam Houston Elementary, that wasn't a thing.
No.
But by the time I left Sam Houston Elementary, during school hours, a teacher had to let you into one of the door. They went and installed those badge readers on every exterior door on campus. That probably would have been like my 2nd or 3rd grade year.
So, Trey, has your daughter ever said anything about stuff like that?
No, that is something that I'd like to ask her about now, though.
Yeah.
That y'all brought it up, because I haven't. I want to say I've heard of one lockdown. I haven't heard of any drills. I know that they did do a lockdown on her school one time for a reason that was, yes, it was a reason, but it wasn't a bad reason. It was, I want to say there was a family that was separating, and either the mom or the dad didn't want the other one to come pick up the kid. And it wasn't that anybody was going to get hurt or that anybody was trying to kidnap anybody. It was just a weird little blip type deal.
Custody battle.
Yeah. So, but luckily, I live in a little bit smaller town now. It's growing super fast, but I don't want to say that I don't have those problems, because it can happen to our schools just as easy as it can happen to anywhere else. But it's not as big of a town with as many kids and as,
Yeah.
I only remember having one actual lockdown while I was still in school. It was when the guy robbed that Wells Fargo.
Oh, yeah. I remember that.
We were on lockdown for hours.
I remember them locking us down for September 11th. I mean, so you didn't go in, like the whole school shut down. You watched the news on TV and nobody went anywhere. Parents were trying to come pick up their kids and they were like, nope, nobody can come. Nobody can do anything. Nobody in, nobody out. That was our biggest lockdown.
They did not do that at my school, but we were in elementary school. We wouldn't have understood anyways.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. I don't know if we need to bring this up, talking about physical image, like how we were raised with that in mind and what that means and looked like for each of us.
I don't remember that ever being a subject of conversation, really. I mean,
Yeah.
I remember probably around middle school, there was a conversation, hey, you need to shower and wear deodorant or you're going to stink.
Because boys do stink.
Girls stink too.
Nuh-uh.
But, I mean, I don't remember there ever being, oh, if you keep eating that, you're going to be too fat. Oh, if you don't do this, you're going to be, like, there wasn't any form of, like, body shaming or anything like that I remember growing up. Comb your hair. You look like
Weird
a wild
stereotypes.
child. Yeah.
Yeah.
Keep a decent enough appearance so that you don't embarrass us in public, and let's go on with our lives.
Yeah. I will say, we can't get through this episode without bringing up Mom gluing, Elmer's gluing bows to my head, because I was bald from the time I was born until I was like 2 years old.
We could have skipped that.
Nope. That's just one of my favorite stories. I just think that it's too funny. Like, who Elmer's glues bows on their heads because they're tired of strangers.
Everybody glued stuff on their kids' head. Okay, here's the deal. When Callie was
Wait, do you really believe that everybody glues stuff on their kids' heads?
Yes. I didn't create this on my own. Here was the problem.
Where'd you hear it from? Because you didn't have the internet back then.
Just as I was getting ready to glue this bow, I don't remember where we were going, but Callie was bald and didn't have teeth when she was a year old. Like, I threatened to buy those for her birthday when she was a year old. And so she was bald. And so we would put bows on her head so that people would know that she was a girl. And that night, for some reason, the Elmer's glue kind of glumped really big. And if I'd have been smart, I would have wiped that off and you just used the little bit. But I didn't for some idiot reason, and I stuck it to her head, and Elmer's glue dries really fast. And
Non-toxic, it's fine.
it was fine until we got home that night, and your dad's getting you ready for bed, and he goes, "Hey, I can't get this bow out." And I'm like, "Just leave it there. It'll come out during the night." And he's like, "Well, how did you get this bow here?" And I said, "I Elmer's glued it." And he did not take it very well. And then the fact that it wouldn't come out and it was on his child's head, he did not respond very well to it.
Gosh.
But a little bit of water washed it right out. I'm just saying.
So funny. I mean, yeah, it's all water-based. It's fine.
Yeah, so there was nothing, it wasn't toxic, there was nothing, it didn't hurt you in any way. Your dad just got mad at me because I glued it into your head.
Oh my goodness. Okay, what about Trey? You're kind of the only one who can answer this next one because you're the only one of the three of us children who have children. How do you think being an exennial, straddling the line between Gen X and Millennial has changed how you raise your kids? Impacted, maybe.
Raise my kids probably a lot stricter than most, probably in that millennial category.
Why do you think that is? Was that because you grew up with strict rules, or?
Well, and I think it's worth noting here that your wife is also a millennial.
Correct. Yes. My wife was born in 88. And I get in trouble a lot for being more strict. But I am not one that when we go out, my kids do not act crazy and wild child, and that's just not the way that I feel they should act. And so I'm not they're just kids, that's what kids do. No, you need to sit down, be quiet. Adults are trying to talk. I'm more of that kind of a person. I'm not kids will be kids, just let them do it. That's not my mindset.
I think for you, it's about there's a time and a place. And if you're sitting down trying to have a conversation with another person, that's not very conducive to children running around being kids. But if they want to go in the backyard and go be kids, that's totally 100%. Fine. Not to say that they can't be kids.
When we're sitting down at a restaurant for dinner, we sit down, we be quiet. Yes, we can talk and we can color and we can laugh, but we're not jumping on the chairs. We're not running around the restaurant.
Yeah.
I don't.
There are ways that you have to behave in public.
Correct.
That you don't necessarily have to behave that way at home all of the time, but you do have to behave a certain type of way in certain places.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well,
and I will be the first to take my kids. I can't stand it when we're at a restaurant and there's a table, and the kids are screaming and running around. It drives me insane. If my kids are doing that, I take my kids outside, or I take my kids and we go outside, and we will have a talk outside, and we will do whatever it is, or we will sit outside until this is over, and then we will reintroduce ourselves into the restaurant, not being crazy, because other people are also trying to eat and have a good time, and they don't want somebody else ruining their dinner.
Meal.
So
I also think that it's really
y'all embarrassing me.
Yeah.
Like in a situation like that.
I get embarrassed when my kids are acting like that.
I also think that it's really admirable the way that you and Jess have raised them. Like, at least in my perspective, they're not sitting here begging for iPads and they only want to watch TV. I mean, like, we want to play card games
at our house
and be
lately.
silly.
We are working with our daughter Kayla on the iPad. We bought her one, I don't know, a couple of years ago when we went to go to see my father-in-law, Jess's dad, and we had to take a plane flight, and we bought one for Kayla so that she could have something to do on the plane flight. Since then, it has morphed into this, can I watch my tablet? Well, here lately it has got, in me and Jess's eyes, too much. And so we have been, no, today we're not watching our tablet, or we're not watching our tablet this weekend. And she does get upset that she can't watch her tablet, and she doesn't understand why. And we try to explain, hey, it's not good for your brain. It's not good for development. Yeah. We need to go outside and be playing, and But so you haven't seen it at home because we do get that still, but not as much probably as most.
Yeah,
And
no, I think that's awesome.
this is just my 2 cents. I am not a parent. I don't have kids, but for Kayla's generation, I think it's important for her to get exposure to things like that. But it's also important for her to understand that that is not everything.
Yes.
The boundaries.
Well, that's
too.
what we don't like is we come home from school. Hey, can I watch my tablet? Yeah, sure. But then she's on her tablet from the time she gets home from school until the time she goes to bed. That's not okay.
Yeah.
And so that's
Yeah,
what
I
we're
think y'all are
trying
going to have to watch technology like I never had to even think about it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I'm going to say this. I think sometimes it's really good for kids not to have everything. You know, we talk about, here a while back, we talked about the level of toys that kids get these days and that they're just inundated. And Callie, I think it was you that said they're not the kind that even allow them to imagine and create their own story with. It's something that tells them the story or leads them down. And I think it's to their advantage not to have all of that, to have to figure out how to play together and how to entertain themselves, because you don't want that kid growing up to be that person who that's all they know how to do.
Yeah.
Necessity is
Again,
the mother of invention.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
there has to be a balance there because it's okay to hear other people's stories, but I think it's also important to be able to create your own.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I agree.
Yep.
Okay.
Weird thoughts.
I want to touch on this one across the three of us, and I'd really be interested. I think you talked about it a little bit earlier, Mom, but the note you've got here is reflections on generational influences from being raised by another generation. Because I don't know that we got this as much as some of the other kids in our generation. Like Trey, you were talking about you haven't always followed politics very closely because it is aggravating and frustrating. I don't ever remember Mom and Dad like pushing political views down our throats.
Yeah.
Like I would have told you that growing up, y'all were relatively conservative, politically speaking, but not like you're voting red or you're dead. It was never anything like that.
You had a granddad that was.
Yours?
No, yours.
Papa.
Papa only voted Democrat.
Yeah,
And
I was like, he
isn't
was
there a
Democrat
story that
through
the
and
one
through.
time he didn't, I don't remember who the Republican would have been, but it was Nixon a Republican? And then that's who he voted for, and so he never voted Republican again.
That's funny. See, I don't know that I was ever old enough to have that kind of conversation with Papa.
Yeah.
That was not what was
Yeah.
on his mind when we were together.
Lord, no. He was a playmate when he was with you.
Yeah. But I think some, particularly kids in our generation, had parents that were on some level political zealots. And I think that may be part of what has driven this severe divide in our nation at this point is so many kids from my generation have seen the impact of the political issues from their parents' generation and said, we don't want to do that. And I think that it's also really similar with parenting, how a lot of baby boomers to Gen X would have been much more strict. And now those Gen X who raised millennials were strict with their kids, and those millennials saw it as a restriction. And so now you've got all of these millennials raising kids who just let their kids go do anything because they have to express themselves at every second of every day. And so I think it's kind of one of those things, kind of like on the political spectrum, how it's swung over to this far other side where it's just different. And I don't think that if I did have kids that I don't think I would be raising them the same way. And I think that's largely in part due to the way that you and Dad raised us.
Wait a minute, you wouldn't be using them the same way as what?
I don't think I would be raising my kids the same way that other people in my generation are raising theirs.
No, because your mama would be going, hey, make that kid behave.
Yeah. Do you think that came from your upbringing?
Yes. I think it probably came from the fact that we were taught to respect adults, first off. And so if that adult told you something, you dang well better listen. Because if you didn't, I mean, my dad was really good friends with my middle school principal. I knew that whatever I did at school was going to get back to Dad. because he was going to tell. And so I think that's part of it.
I don't think you taught us that, though. I don't think part of what you and Dad taught us is that you have to listen to every adult because adults are inherently infallible.
Oh, I know. I did not teach you that.
Yeah, well, and I will say, like, one of the things that you have said on a number of occasions, we're really good and really kind and respectful to older people and kids. We get along with those age groups really well, where a lot of people, especially in our generation, don't. And are kind of, I think that there's some fear associated with that. I think that there's some power dynamics that are very strange. And I love old people, and I love little kids. Like, and I feel like we can go and find fun in that. And I think some of that has to do with the way that you and Dad raised us. But I think more of it has to do with the way that our grandparents were involved in our lives. Like, there's still a bump here in Denton where we hit it that everybody in my family thinks about me learning to drive with my grandfather and him dozing off and falling asleep, and I would hit this bump way too hard. And so you flew out of your seat, and now it just is fun. And so I just feel like we were raised with our grandparents really being grandparents, being friends much more than they were parents. And that made it that much more fun and also more relatable. And so when I go into a situation now with older people or young kids, it's, well, I want to just hang out with you. Like, let's find something fun. Let's do something fun and see where we both can laugh and giggle through this, because I like to do those things.
Yeah, you're not inherently superior because you're older than me. You're
right,
but you are also a person.
But you're respected.
Yeah. Treat
like that,
everyone like people because they are people regardless of who they are.
Yeah. And I feel like it's kind of respect until you give me a reason not to. Innocent until proven guilty, right? Like, I'm going to respect you until you tell me that you shouldn't be respected. And that may be with words or actions or whatever that is, but you automatically get respect from me at the beginning, at the start.
Yeah, not because you're older than me, but because you're a person.
Because you're a person. Yeah.
I think we taught y'all to be respectful unless somebody proved otherwise. And if they proved otherwise, we were behind you on that to be able to say, and there were conversations. There were times y'all got that wrong. There were times I've got that wrong. But there were conversations there to say, wait a minute. You could get mad at a teacher, but you still had to be respectful of that teacher until they just went so far out of line that there wasn't anything there that I could justify to say, this person still deserves your respect.
Yeah.
But even at that, I didn't expect you to be a jerk about it. You could be quiet, go on about your business, but you would have been in a lot of trouble if you had been, a jerk back.
Yeah. I think one of the things that, and I don't know that y'all taught this directly, but I think this is a result of how you raised us, that it's okay to remove yourselves from situations that you don't want to be in or you're uncomfortable being in.
Good.
Yeah, I agree.
Yay, I didn't do as bad a job as I thought I did. I like y'all. I like who you are as adults. I like the fact that you can walk into a room and people will like you. And that was part of what I wanted you to be when you grew up, was that people would like who you were. And I think I've been very successful at that.
I don't think that you ever wanted that to be our motivation. I don't think you wanted us to walk into a room and be liked because we wanted to be likable. I think you just taught us to be likable.
Yeah, how to be likable, but also given us that choice and the option that it was okay to not be liked by everybody.
Yeah.
And to not be liked for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
I like that. All right. We're way long on this. Let's wrap this puppy up.
Yeah. We've already had some weird thoughts this week, but Gig, are there any that you wanted to go over?
Yeah. So a couple that I wanted to touch on. So we all know the story of back in my day, we had to walk uphill both ways in the snow with no, whatever. What is the back in my day that you find yourself thinking about or will kind of define your generation for you?
And the one that comes to mind is like buffering speeds for like videos online. Like somebody gets like I even find myself doing it these days. I'll find somebody who's like a few years younger than me, and they'll try and pull up a video on YouTube, and it'll take 10 seconds to load, and they'll just be furious. And I'm like, dude, it used to take us 10 minutes to turn the internet on.
Yeah.
Chill.
Yes. I was going to say, I feel like mine is similar in that it's the instantaneousness of everything online. So like I said, in MySpace or Zanga, if y'all like Cole, you were probably even too young for that, but you had to code everything. You had to do it yourself. You had to go and look up how to make bold text and how to enter a line break and how to change the background color. And so you had to work through all of those things. Whereas now so many programs and software and apps, there's an app for everything to just do it for you and get it all done. And so back in my day, we had to do the work ourselves. We had to learn how to do it and make it work for ourselves.
Okay, Trey, it's your turn.
I would have said, actually, Jess, my wife, was talking to Kayla the other day, maybe yesterday even, and it's the only thing I can think of that fits perfectly. And it was back in my day, we didn't have tablets and we didn't have, social media and cell phones. We had to go play and go outside and create our own entertainment.
Yeah.
That one is probably what I think of the most when I hear this.
I love it. Mom, do you have one, or are you still uphill both ways in the snow?
No, but I mentioned mine earlier because I grew up with that connection to agriculture, to that basic kind of life. My grandmother raised chickens and wrung their neck and then cooked it for dinner. I helped my grandfather. He had to irrigate. And so he taught us how to set pipes, and you'd go out in the field and you had to get this section going in that pipe after he'd cut a ditch full of water. I wish y'all had that. I mean, when I was out of high school, the summer I graduated out of high school, I went and worked for them, and I was riding on the back of a tractor spraying weeds. There were 4 of us across the back of this tractor spraying weeds. And I just wish y'all had that, because that was basic, foundational, I think is maybe a better word. I guess my good news story is that all 3 of you are right here. And that was fun.
That was fun.
It was a good time.
It was. It was. Thanks so much for joining us this week, Trey.
Yeah, absolutely.
No
Thanks for being here, man.
I loved it.
Love you guys.
Love you too.
Love you guys.